Thank you very much for joining us today for this very important conversation. This is the third installment in our speaker series titled Catholic Perspectives on Racism and White Supremacy. If those of you who have been before, I do see some familiar faces. Welcome back. It's good to have you back. And anybody who's joining new today, welcome for the first time. My name is Dr. Michael Lovette-Colyer, Assistant Vice President for Mission and Ministry, and along with Dr. Burns, we're the two co-sponsors of this series. It's a great honor to welcome our guest today, especially Dr. Teel from our very own Department of Theology and Religious Studies, who was with us last week as well. So thank you, Dr. Teel, for doing double duty.
Yes,
and of course, also a special honor to welcome Dr. White. Thank you for joining us today from Catholic Theological Union. Just a few words of instruction about how we'll manage the next 90 minutes or so. I encourage you all to use the speaker view choice on Zoom. That helps focus in on the person talking and cut down on the cognitive dissonance that's sometimes created by seeing everybody else. Please do keep yourself muted. I guess maybe you don't have a choice because we're controlling that, but keep yourself muted throughout. The dialogue between Dr. Teel and Dr. White will last for approximately 40 minutes or so. And at the end of that time, there'll be a chance for questions and answers. And at that point, you'll be able to enter in your questions into the chat. And then Dr. Burns will ask you to unmute yourself and to speak your question to our two main facilitators at that time. Okay. So again, welcome you all. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll turn it over to you, to Jeff.
Thank you, Michael. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Burns. I'm the director of the Harps Center for Catholic Thought and Culture here at the University of San Diego, and we're co-sponsoring this along with Michael and University Ministry. And so I welcome our speakers, Dr. Teel and Dr. White. But it's my job to introduce our introducer. So I'm happy to introduce one of my favorite people here at the University of San Diego, the distinguished professor and chair of the Department of Theology and Religious Studies, very highly sought after speaker and retreat leader. She is the author of Catholic Theology in the Era of HIV and AIDS, Marriage for Life, and just a tremendous person. So Emily Reimer-Barry, we welcome you.
Thank you so much for that very generous introduction, Dr. Burns. It is my pleasure to introduce to you my colleague, Dr. Karen Teel, and then also I will introduce Dr. C. Vanessa White, who is our guest today. Dr. Teel is professor in the Department of Theology and Religious Studies and affiliated faculty in the Department of Ethnic Studies at the University of San Diego. Dr. Teel earned her PhD in Catholic Systematic Theology at Boston College under the mentorship of M. Sean Copeland. She is the author of the book Racism and the Image of God. Her articles and essays have appeared in Teaching Theology and Religion, Black Theology, and the Journal of the American Academy of Religion. She has publications forthcoming in Theological Studies and the T&T Clark Handbook of Theological Anthropology. Her essay entitled White Supremacy and Christian Theology, which appeared in a volume honoring Dr. Copeland, won the College Theology Society's Award for Best Article of the Year in 2018. She's also a member of the Catholic Theological Society of America and the American Academy of Religion, and an affiliate member of the Black Catholic Theological Symposium. Dr. Teel is a white, cisgender, female, U.S. American Roman Catholic theologian whose teaching and research investigate the Christian, especially Catholic dimensions of the problems of racism and white supremacy in the United States. She's especially interested in how whiteness functions as a racial and cultural identity. With her work, she hopes to motivate more white people to become critically aware of their whiteness and to work actively to create a more equitable church and society. And she will be joined in our conversation today by our esteemed guest, Dr. C. Vanessa White. Dr. C. Vanessa White, D.Min, is Associate Professor of Spirituality and Ministry at Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. She was appointed this summer to become the new Associate Director for the THM degree program at Xavier University of Louisiana's Institute for Black Catholic Studies. Xavier University is the only historically Black and Catholic university in the nation. Dr. White is former director of the Christian Brothers LaSalle Manor Retreat Center, as well as former director of the Claretian Lay Volunteers and Missionaries. Her articles and essays have appeared in New Theology Review, U.S. Catholic, America, National Catholic Reporter, and CNN.org. She is co-editor of the book, Songs of Our Hearts and Meditations of Our Souls, Prayers for Black Catholics. That's published by St. Anthony Messenger Press. Dr. White is a contributor for the Give Us This Day daily prayer booklet published by Liturgical Press, as well as the Catholic Women Preach web series. She is part of the advisory team for Fetzer's Institute Study on American Spirituality, as well as a member of the American Academy of Religion and the Society for the Study of Christian Spirituality. And I want to thank you especially for introducing me to Father Augustus Tolton in one of your essays. Father Augustus Tolton felt a call to the priesthood, but was denied entry to every Catholic seminary in the country because he was Black. He overcame many obstacles, and his legacy is so important for us to think about when we talk about racism and anti-racism work within the church. So thank you for introducing me to his legacy. A womanist practical theologian, her research is focused on the intersections of spirituality and praxis and is attentive to issues of discernment, health, women's spirituality, diversity and intercultural dialogue, leadership and development, spiritual and ministry formation, spiritual practices, lay ministry, adult faith formation, and all issues pertinent to the lives of Black Catholics. Thank you so much for being with us today. We look forward to the conversation between Dr. White and Dr. Teel, and then with all of us together.
Well, it's good to be here.
Yes, thank you. It's good to be here with all of you. Thank you, Emily, for that generous introduction. So welcome, good afternoon. Hello to everyone. We're delighted you could be with us today for this third conversation in this series. Some of you have been here probably for all three, but just in case you weren't, the first one was with Dr. Constance Carroll, who spoke about the history of the Catholic Church in the United States and the problems of slavery and white supremacy. The second was last week, and I was conversing last week with Dr. Timon Davis from Loyola University Chicago. And this week we're here with Dr. White. So thank you for joining us. So shall we jump right in? Do you have any preliminary comments you'd like to make, Dr. White? Or?
Well, one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to lead you in a song. So we're going to begin with just being mindful that we are in the holy presence. We're in the presence of that sweet Holy Spirit. So I'm going to sing this song. And after I go through it one time, if you want to join in, feel free. So being mindful, we are in the holy presence. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. Melt me, mold me, fill me, use me. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me, on us. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on us. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on us. Melt us, mold us, fill us, use us. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on us. I'd like to take this time to call upon those holy ancestors: Augustus Tolton, Thea Bowman, Cyprian Davis, Bede Abram, Nathan Jones, my family, Virgil, Coretha, Mary, Robert, and Vivian. I ask that I am open to the most Holy Spirit as I journey this day, as I enter into conversation with my esteemed colleague and friend, Karen Teel, as we journey together and as we are challenged this day. May that sweet, living Spirit be with us. Amen.
Amen.
All right, now we can begin.
Thank you, my sister. Thank you for that wonderful beginning. We have begun. Thank you. So I wanted to start sort of like we did last week. Timon and I spoke a bit about our own experiences growing up Catholic. I know that likewise, you and I both have been Catholic since childhood. And I thought maybe we could start by just describing a little bit what our childhoods were like, what it was like to grow up Catholic. And we can see where we might have some similarities, where we might have some differences.
Okay. You want me to start?
Sure,
You start.
or I can.
I'll
I
start.
can start. Okay.
No,
you start.
why don't you start? You start.
Okay,
and then
I'll start.
I'll just, you start, and I'll fill in.
Let's just argue for 90 minutes about who should start. No. Okay, I'll start. So I grew up in South Central Washington State in a Catholic family. Several generations Catholic. I think on my dad's side, it went back to his parents. He had one of his parents brought the other into the church, but on my mom's side, it goes way back. So that was kind of my world. I went to a Catholic church. We went every Sunday. It was a mostly white church, which I didn't notice at the time exactly, but now I'm aware that that was the case. And all of my life sort of revolved around that community. So I went to the kindergarten through 8th grade school that was attached to the parish. By the time I went through, it was not nuns teaching any longer in the school, but they were recent. I think they had recently been there, had recently changed to lay teachers. And it was a smallish town, and all of our family friends were members of that same parish. I was in, 4-H club with the children of all the same families in that parish, same class of 24 students from kindergarten through 8th grade. And then I did go to the public high school. We didn't have a Catholic high school. I think my mom would have liked to send us there if there had been one, but there wasn't one. So we went through the public high school, and then I went to Gonzaga, which was a Jesuit, a Catholic university, and did also my graduate degrees at Boston College, which is Catholic. So I'm very much formed in the Catholic tradition. It was really a part of my daily life growing up. So much so that I can remember one time we came back from a vacation on a Sunday. We hadn't been to church yet, and we didn't go, even though there was a mass we could have gone to that evening. That's the one time I remember when I was growing up that we missed a weekly Sunday mass. So it was a very, very regular, constant presence in my life, that community. Those are some of the things I remember.
Well, I grew up Catholic, but my family, I come from a very ecumenical family. So in my family, we're Methodist, we're Catholic, we're Lutheran, we're Pentecostal, we're apostolic. So it was a very ecumenical family. But my first cousins and my family, we were Catholic. Now, it's the interesting aspect of being a Catholic. I grew up in the 60s. So, I grew up in the 60s and 70s as a young person in the Catholic Church. And so I can barely remember actually when the rail was taken out and when the altar was changed. It's like a very fuzzy memory, but I can remember that. What I do remember is that I was raised in Chicago, right in the city of Chicago. My community was Black Catholic, but I remember that all the images were white. Like Mary was white, Jesus was white, everything was white, but we were Black. I went to St. Killian Catholic School, was formed by the Adrian Dominican sisters, Sister Jamie Phelps's community, and I remember just being, what I primarily remember growing up was my confirmation. And confirmation, wearing the white robes, wearing the red collar and the beanie, the ritual of being confirmed. And I was very attracted as a child to the rituals of the church. All the rituals, the devotions, those were things that the candles, the smells and the bells, as she would say. Those are the things that I was reminded of. I remember that we would go to church every Sunday, whether you wanted to or not, you were going to church. And that's not just a Catholic thing, that's a Black thing growing up. That was like you going to church, no, I don't feel like going to church. You getting up and going to church. And so I can remember going to church. I remember earlier in church, as I got a little older, being bored in church and saying, this is so boring, this is so boring, this is so boring. This is my teen years. And I remember very clearly hearing a voice that says, get involved and get involved. And that's what I did. Because I loved reading. I loved reading the Bible stories. So I said, why don't I become a lector? Plus also I can find out what's happening in the sacristy. Because I was a very inquisitive type. So as I said, God will use what God will use to get you where you need to be. That's what I say. So I became a lector. 16 years old, I became a lector in church. But what I do remember is this: in my primary memory about being in the Catholic Church was that there was this sense of mystery. A sense of mystery, a sense of awe and wonder. So I remember that. But I also remember not till I got older, and we'll be talking in a few minutes about my young adulthood, I didn't think about the fact that all that I was learning was white. I was learning everything about the Catholic Church from a white perspective. The saints were white. The saints were all white. The priests and sisters were all white. I didn't meet a Black sister until one of my friends who was at church when I was about 16 or 17 introduced me to her aunt, who was a sister of the Holy Family. And that was my first introduction to a Black sister. But until that time, everything was white, white, white. So that's what I would primarily say I remember about growing up Catholic.
Can I ask you, do you remember thinking about that consciously? That all of the imagery and the saints and everything was white, or is it just something you remember looking back?
It wasn't, and I'll speak about that a little bit. It wasn't until I went to the Institute for Black Catholic Studies as a young adult. And I went down there in the late 80s, and I had a class with Bede Abrams. And Bede Abrams spoke about he's a professor of systematic theology there, and he was a Franciscan. And one of the things he said is, somebody stole all my stuff. That was his big line. Somebody stole all my stuff. He's like, what do you mean somebody stole all his stuff? What he was meaning is that our history, who we are as Black Catholics, the images have been stolen from us. We don't know it. And we don't even know we don't know. So we don't even know we don't know. So I was formed in this white church, and everything I was learning was from a European way of being, whether if it was the Polish community, Polish priest, I was learning about being a Polish Catholic. If it was the German priests and sisters, I was learning about being a German Catholic. But I wasn't learning about being a Black Catholic. But at that time, there was that sense of, what you don't know, you don't know. So I didn't even know that this was happening, and did not, but then I would go to my cousins' churches who were from other religious traditions, and then I'd hear the music. I would get the music, because all the music I was getting St. Louis Jesuits. When there was even a talk of having different music, it was like, don't have that music because it'll offend some people. Who's the people that you're offending? So I didn't hear this music. So I wouldn't hear the music. But the interesting thing, even with the whole thing of all the white images, that was happening even in other religious traditions. Because I'd go to my cousin's church and cousin's community who's Methodist, whatever, and in her home would be the white, blonde hair, blue-eyed Jesus. So I mean, there was a real sense of denying who you are. We talk about the image and likeness of God, made in the image and likeness of God, but then all the images around us are white. So there's that denial of your blackness.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Right. Do you see much change in that today?
Well, we have, we take 2 steps forward and you take 1 step back. I think that's part of what happens within our communities. There was a time when I remember when I finished my studies at the Institute, and this was in the 90s, I was being asked to speak about the Black presence in the Bible and about Black saints and, you know, all of this. And there was that time I called the Black Catholic Renaissance. And I grew up as a young adult during the Black Catholic Renaissance, when there was the intentional focus on the gifts of Blackness in the church. But then I would say when we reached the millennium, 2000 and beyond, there's been a waning of that. There's been, what has happened is that we've focused on multiculturalism. And in some ways, multiculturalism has diluted our what's gone on for many underrepresented groups. Underrepresented groups have to fight to be acknowledged and to be recognized, because we're not focused on them anymore. And there's that, but we do have places such as the Institute for Black Catholic Studies, it was founded in 1980, and it's still in existence. We're still preparing people to minister in the Black community. So we still have places such as that. And we have such gatherings as the National Black Catholic Congress. So some of those things are happening. There's the Sankofa Institute at the Oblate School of Theology that is also focused on looking at the Black presence. But the thing that's interesting is that how many Black Catholics are actually attending those institutes. That's where there's been the challenge. So we see persons from other ethnic groups and communities who are other religious traditions, Protestant, who are attending these institutes, but we don't see Catholics doing it, supporting it. So that is, I would say, is the challenge we have today.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm trying to think back. You said the 90s was the Black Catholic Renaissance. I'm trying to think.
I'd say the late 80s and the 90s,
and
was the Black Catholic Renaissance.
Okay, so I was in high school, but then college during the 90s. I don't remember any of that touching Gonzaga, for example. Do you think that was among Black Catholics, or do you think
that was
it
among Black Catholics?
White churches?
It was touching a little bit, but it really was among Black Catholics, where there was that sense of awareness that we've had to fight as Black Catholics to have our gifts recognized and have our gifts acknowledged, and to really believe in our own gifts. That's been part, because of internalized racism, because of the system of racism in this country. What has happened many times is that Black people then take on the beliefs of the dominant white racist structural system. And so then we believe about our own selves what that structural system believes about us. And so what we would have is that resistance. You know, this session is about resistance and resilience. And so there would be that, in one sense, it'd be resistance among many Black Catholics of, I don't want to learn that because I'm Catholic. We're all Catholic. And talking about that is divisive. And the thing that I always say is that Catholic means universal. And universal means that every person should be able to feel at home in the Catholic Church and should see themselves in the Catholic Church. But if your story is not told, if you don't even know your story, and if those in leadership do not know your story and do not know your contributions, then it is not truly universal. Father Cyprian Davis, who was he wrote the book, The History of Black Catholics in the United States. And he was a Benedictine monk. He was a medieval scholar. He was not a black historian. You know, that was not what he studied. He studied medieval history. When he began speaking across the country, and this is before he wrote this book, he would go in communities where there were black Catholics. And the Black Catholics would be so excited that he was there and would want to know about Black Catholic history. And he would tell them, you know, well, you should know your history. And, you know, that go look here, and he would tell them. And they said, we had been told that we didn't have a history, that Black people that we don't have a history in the Catholic Church. And one of the things that he had learned, because he had studied at, I think, Louvain is where he studied. Yeah, he had studied history. And one of the things he learned about the study of history is like being a detective. Where there are human beings, there are always documents and materials. So you always can find something. And that began his journey into going and finding these documents, finding this history, and then writing this book. And the book came out in 1990. And it's actually, Dr. Cecilia Moore is now in the process of Father Cyprian, before he died, turned over all his materials to her so that there could be a second edition. And she's is working on that edition now. But one of the things is that we did not have a history. That's really the primary book, the source of our history. Such people as Dr. Moore and Dr. Katrina Sanders and Shannon D. Williams and Diane Batts-Morrow, they are historians who are now writing about Black Catholic history. But there was a time we didn't have that history. Let's say pretty much before 1990, that's recent in learning about that history. And it's a slow process in doing the history and getting the support to be able to do the history, particularly if you are a Black Catholic scholar who's also being asked to do varieties of other things. So there's that challenge.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more with you about the really rich cultural diversity we have in our church. Right? So everybody's here, like you said. We're African American, European American, Filipino, Vietnamese American, Native American, Mexican, Guatemalan, Salvadoran American. Everybody's here, right? Arab American. Everybody's in the church, and yet we know that the dominant church in the U.S. historically has been culturally white, and so we're trying to deal with that. White people have controlled the power in the church. Today, I think a lot of people in the church would be able to acknowledge, even including white people, that people from various cultures, we all bring something. Everybody brings gifts to the church. But like you said, we don't have a lot of specific knowledge, right? In some cases, we need to create that knowledge. We need to go back and find it. And too often, the gifts that all these communities bring are not valued by the institutional church, right? Are not given priority. So I know in the Black Catholic theological community, we have this beautiful phrase, authentically Black and truly Catholic. Authentically Black and truly Catholic. So I wondered if you would just share with us a bit about what you see as the distinctive gifts of the Black community specifically within the Catholic Church. So every community is different, and we need to be aware of the specificity of those differences. So what would you say are some of the gifts that Black Catholics specifically bring to our church?
Well, first of all, I want to state is that one of the things I love about the Catholic Church is that its membership is truly universal. The challenge is living out that universality with the recognition of the gifts of Black peoples, of Latinx peoples, of Asian peoples, of Indigenous peoples, of the varieties communities in the church. Now, with this in mind, I want to state that last week, there was a gathering of over 1,400 Black Catholics that focused on racism in the Catholic Church and the gifts of Black Catholics have to the church. Father Brian Massengale, who gave the keynote address, states he thinks it's time that we change this term, authentically Black and truly Catholic, to radically Black and truly Catholic. This speaks more to our current reality. It speaks to our intention to be on this journey of wholeness. Now I've written about the gifts of our spirituality, which in various different avenues. These gifts arise from our context and our history. Beginning in Africa with the kidnapping and enslavement in the United States, to Reconstruction and Jim Crow, to civil rights movement, and today's Black Lives Matter movement. I usually speak of that in the context because our history didn't just start here in the United States, it started in Africa. And the gifts that we have to bring, those cultural gifts, those spiritual gifts, came out of that particular history and that origins. Those gifts are being oral, that we are an oral people. Doesn't mean that we don't not read and write. Let me get that straight. But our preferred method and mode of communication is the oral method. That it's a both and, it's not an either or. Here in the United States, here in the Western construct, we're very much in an either or way. You're either bad or good, you're either black or white. There's no thought that it could be both and. There's that in between part, that you can be a sinner and a saint at the same time. That there is that sense of the sacred and secular, that I will praise the Lord in my office right here, I'll praise the Lord on the street, and I'll praise the Lord in the church. There's no sense that there's just certain places that you speak about religion and spirituality. That is how the prophetic Black preaching tradition came out of that mode of the sacred and the secular, that on the pulpit, we should be talking about racism. On the pulpit, we should be talking about what is going on with COVID. On the pulpit, we should be talking about healthcare. On the pulpit, we should be talking about maybe who you need to vote for. Now, in some aspects, you can talk about that, and then others, oh, no, we can't talk about this. Our spirituality, from our particular context, and when I say this, right away, I want to get out of your mind that either or, because when I say some of these things, you're going to say, well, that comes, we do that, or we do that. I'm not saying you don't do that, but I'm talking about specifically in a particular mode and consciousness and lens. Our spirituality is God-centered. God is the first and last of our affairs. We wake up in the morning and are thanking God. There is not the question, is there a God? Historically, for Black people, there was not that question, is there a God? God is. God is. That's why that song by James Cleveland, God is, when people play that song in church, you see people are falling out in church because that song just speaks deep down in my soul about who God is. Our spirituality is biblically rooted. There is that sense that the Bible has a place, the Bible story is my story. Now, yes, historically, back in before Vatican II, we were told not to read the Bible, but Black people always had a relationship with the Bible. There always was a sense there are certain stories that spoke directly to us. The stories of Exodus, the story of the sense of Jesus as the God of the oppressed, just as our folks had been lynched and hung on a tree, Jesus was hung on a tree. There's that connection with the Bible, with the fact that the Bible, the story of Exodus was about moving toward freedom. Just as God freed those enslaved Israelites, God is freeing us and is continuing to free us. Our spirituality is spirit-led and fed. There's that sense of the contemplative dimension. And when I say contemplative, I don't mean just standing there and don't say nothing. That is a contemplative way within the Western construct. Contemplation means an awareness of God. For Black people, that awareness of God many times came through the songs, the repetitive songs, through the spirituals, through the marchings, through this, the moans, through the rocking. That sense of contemplation is a part of who we are. That sense of embodiment, that the Spirit dwells within us. Our whole bodies praise and worship God. It's this spirituality, it's a holistic spirituality. Our spirituality is community and person oriented. There's that sense of welcome. You don't go into a Black church and not feel welcome.
Right.
That's the truth. I remember, thinking about experience of racism when I was a young person. When we moved out into the South suburbs, we were trying to find a church, Catholic church. And my family, we went to the St. John the Baptist Church, beautiful church. I mean, beautiful. Oh, his church was so beautiful. We walked into the church and it was just, I was a young child, so beautiful. Immediately, as a young child, I'm talking about 11, 12, I knew I was unwelcome. I knew this was an entirely white church. Didn't know that there were 3 Catholic church in Harvey. One of them was the white church that we were not supposed to go into. And right away, we knew we were not welcome. We stayed through the whole service and we never went back again. We found another church where there was that sense of welcome, that person and community centered. That was important, that the I is defined in the we. I am, therefore we are. Sister Thea talks about, would tell a story about how she had a seminarian who was studying with her. You know, these have a ministry practicum. Some of you know about ministry practicum. A seminarian does a few months of ministry in the community, and it was in the Black community. And this white seminarian came up to Sister Thea one day and said, Sister Thea, I got a question for you. Why is it Mr. Jones got a new car? It was a Cadillac. Everybody in this community is happy he got this car. Now, they didn't get a new car. Why are they so happy that he got a new car? And Sister Thea said, because if he's got a car, then I got a ride. There's that sense of the we, that we share what we have, that that community and person oriented. There's that sense of if something happens to one of us, you know, if we look at that scripture and 1 Corinthians, if one of us suffers, we all suffer. If one of us is uplifted, we all share in the joy. That's Black spirituality. If it happens to one person, all of us are celebrating. That's why, you know, when Barack Obama became the president, you saw Black people falling out all over the place, so happy. And you're like, why? That was him became president. That wasn't because when he became president, it was like it lifted us all up. Because it's God-centered, biblically rooted, spirit-led and fed, community and person-oriented, we have to be about justice. One of the primary gifts for Black spirituality and Black people is that spirituality of justice. And because we're going to, many of the civil rights, the human rights movements in the Black community originated out of the church. And that justice leads you to freedom. It's very interesting. I was director of the Tolton Scholars Program for 18 years, which is a lay formation program, primarily for Black Catholics from the United States and from other countries who are living here. And I would be in dialogue sometimes with our other formation program, which was primarily a white program. You know, it was primarily the white folks, and both were the white directors. The directors were both white. And we had a conversation, and then we had the Reimer program, which was primarily for Latino, which was for Latino Catholics. One day, the 4 directors, because there was 2 directors for the white program, the 4 of the directors were talking about doing a shared workshop. And we got to talking about what are some of the themes that we have in our, during our time of formation. It was only in the Latino program, the Reimer program, and the Tolton program that we addressed justice. The Emmaus program, they never addressed it. They said, we don't talk about, we haven't talked, our theological reflection hasn't focused around there. That comes out of our context for Black and brown people. So automatically we're going to talk about justice. Justice is going to be a part, and justice is going to be a part of our spirituality. These are gifts that we as Black people bring to the church.
Amen. Thank you.
Yeah. I get very passionate too, you know.
Absolutely.
That embodiment of the Spirit just flowing through me, which is interesting when I'm in conversation. When I was a young adult minister, and I've almost always been in situations where I've been the only Black person. The only Black director, the only Black person in vocation work, the only Black person lay volunteer ministry, the only Black person, the lay ministers conference, you know, a lot of times I'm the only Black person. Though I tried to do some mentoring, but it was always hard. But one of the things that always was said to me is that you come on too strong.
Oh.
And that is very much coming out of the white context.
Yes.
Of that sense of being uncomfortable with strong emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And the separation from the body, the intellect, and the body, the spirit, the separation. Well, in Black spirituality, it's all embodied. So there's not that fear of the emotion.
Yeah, I certainly grew up with that sort of culturally white, you remain calm. That's the most important value, no matter what, is you remain calm.
Right.
So that can be really explosive when we come together and we don't know each other's cultures, and the way that we express our spirituality is so different.
You're so true. And and the thing is, for Black people to survive and to be successful in this country, we've had to learn about the white culture.
Right.
We've had to learn your ways of being so that we can survive. White people do not have to learn about Black people.
Have to. No,
you do not. And that already is a problem in our society. If you do not feel that learning about another is for your own survival,
right?
That is what we need to change our way of thinking. That in order to survive in this country, if we are going to survive, we are going to have to be in relationship and learn about each other and journey together.
Yeah, I wonder if more white people will start to feel that way. Given everything that's going on now, I don't know if this will turn out to be a real turning point for our country and our church or not, but I hope it is.
Yeah.
I hope it is.
Yeah.
So would you have any suggestions? I know that your expertise is in spirituality, and I'm wondering if you would have any suggestions for us for practices that Catholics, maybe especially white Catholics, but Catholics in general, what kind of practices could we adopt to help us, I think especially white Catholics, to cultivate a spirituality that really compels us to resist racism and white supremacy? Is there any place you would tell us to start? If the group of us here, those of us who are white, said to you, where should we start? We want to work on our spirituality in a way that leads us to this concern with justice that you so rightly said, right? Every group except the white group was already concerned with. How can we make that connection from where we are? Is there anything that you've seen in your experience where you would start for us?
Well, I'm gonna do a both and. I sat there and I said about the both and. So it's gonna have to be a both and. So you can't just start with the spirituality. You're gonna have to start with the looking at acknowledging that the church has been a racist institution, and that has and own its own complicity in racism. I love the we've written these pastorals, and we got the new one, Open Wide Our Hearts. But that pastoral, as Brian Massengill mentioned, and I've looked it over too, does not address white nationalism.
No, it doesn't.
Does not address the Black Lives Matter movement, and really does not address how the Catholic Church, its own complicity. It was the Catholic Church was one of the grantors of different areas in Africa to enslave people through their assentio. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about the fact that there were religious communities, Jesuits and Dominicans come to mind, and the Ursulines and the Sisters of Charity of Nazareth come to mind, who owned slaves. We're going to have to acknowledge some of this, and look at what we need to do. Now, Georgetown, I give a shout out to Georgetown. They're trying to do something and working at that, but it's a broader issue than that. We're going to have to look at the leadership, intentionally developing leadership that is culturally diverse. That's through invitation and mentoring. I got involved in the Catholic Church and became a leadership in the Catholic Church because I was invited. And then I had people mentoring me. Sister Jamie would take me someplace. Miss Gloria Green, St. Louis would take me someplace. That is how I became a part of the church. And education. That we need to send our leaders to those places to learn, to focus on ministry in the Black community. Such places as Xavier University's Institute for Black Catholic Studies in New Orleans.
Yeah, anybody can go to that, right?
Everybody.
Yep.
We got Black, Latino, white, Asian. We got everybody going to take 1 week or 3 weeks. You can get your master's degree And you could take 1 week, go there. Those are places. So that has happened. Now, looking at that, you know, when I look at what is it that we need practices, I'm gonna start before I hit the white people. I'm gonna hit the black people. Coming out of that lens. So as Austin Channing in the book, you know, I'm a theological educator, so I got a book for you. In the book, I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness. Austin Channing Brown. She says, white people are exhausting. Living in a white world is exhausting. And so as you're on this journey as black people, and you know, we need to look at we have to look at our own spirituality so that we can continue to be people of justice and can enter into these conversations. Because I mean, I've been dealing with this all my life, and people ask me, how can you know, you got a smile on your face, you still seem to be a person of hope. You've been involved in ministry in the church for over 30 years. It's because of the spiritual practices I do as a black person. 1, make your top 10 list. Enjoyment of life. White folks can do this too. Make your top 10 list. What are the 10 things you enjoy doing? And once a week, do one of those things. Black people need to see the gratitude in the midst. We need to continue, as our ancestors saw gratitude in all things, we need to continue to see gratitude. Prayer, calling upon our ancestors, calling upon our black holy ancestors who have gone through this struggle, who can still be with us. Fellowship. Now, it's really interesting. During this time of COVID, and I've been this virtual reality in this, with this laptop, I've probably not been as exhausted because I haven't been around white people all that, you know. I'm at Catholic Theological Union. I am the only Black Catholic lay woman professor at CTU, at a global school that has persons from all over the world. I'm the only Black Catholic professor. I can count on my hands all the other persons of color. So what I have done, there's that sense of fellowship, practicing of hospitality, finding your allies, journeying with my allies. My allies primarily have been my allies from ACTUS, the Academy of Catholic Hispanic Theologians of the United States, because there's 2 Latino Catholics at CTU, so I've developed my allies. And my fellowship with the Asian community. We've got several Asian scholars. And so coming together and being in fellowship, spending that time, having that drink, or if you don't drink, you know, have that little snack or whatever, and virtually coming together has been helpful. And then caring for the body, taking care of this body, because I have found, particularly in the Black community, we're dying younger. There's the healthcare crisis. There's the healthcare crisis with COVID. There is, I became interested in healthcare because of spirituality and health, because people like Sister Thea, Nathan Jones, and Archbishop Light, younger people were dying. Because this work is exhausting, spiritually and physically exhausting, and we ain't taking care of ourselves. So that's for my Black folks. For my white folks, for my white community, develop a spiritual practice of hospitality and welcome. One of the things that I have found as I have journeyed, how many times I was not invited to things. I did not know. I had to find out about a gathering, or folks were getting together for a meal or going out or whatever after the fact. Because I'm not part of your circle. So developing that spirituality practice of hospitality and welcome. Who is not at this table? Who is not here? Who needs to be here? And so having that lens and intentionally having that practice, coming together for shared story. It's good. Well, how we began our time, Karen, you and I sharing our stories. I have found that that is an important practice as we journey to be anti-racist and to be open to others, that we begin to share our stories and take the time to share our stories. Attending Catholic churches and events and prayer events in communities of color, you're going to be uncomfortable. White people don't like being uncomfortable. I mean, that book, White Fragility, is about the fact that white people don't like being uncomfortable. Black people have been uncomfortable our whole lives, living in a white world, and we journey through it. It's time for white people to begin to feel uncomfortable and journey through it, because there is hope on the other side. There's hope on the other side. That's the thing. You get through this, but it makes you strong. There's that hope on the other side. Practice humility. As academics, you don't know it all. One of the things that I have found, and this is like a spirit, for me, teaching is a spiritual practice. It really is a spiritual practice. And I really think of it as such. And one of the things, as I teach, it brings me closer to God and closer to others. But one of the things I realized within the teaching, particularly for my white scholars, is you need to begin to deconstruct and decenter your syllabi. If I were to show you my syllabi for the Introduction to the Christian Spiritual Life, every week of that syllabus, every week, every theme, there are voices from varieties of different communities, not just in the chapter, not just in the module on context, not just in the module on women, which is how we have been taught, but throughout the entire syllabus, there is that sense of deconstruction and decentering. I do that because then my students who enter into that syllabi are able to see themselves. Everyone can see themselves. And it brings them that sense of journey. Their journey in the spiritual life is that journey in union and that journey toward authenticity. And if you don't see yourself in that syllabi, and if you use as an excuse, oh, that's too much work, or I got all this other, I just heard this just the other, well, that's, I've got so much other stuff to read. Well, you find the time to read all that so much other stuff.
Yep.
We need to look at that. And then also, one of the practices that I find is helpful is the practice of Visio Divina, which is like Lectio Divina, but is using art. And if we were to just begin praying with art that is not our typical image of the white Jesus, the typical image that we have of St. Augustine looking white when he was from Africa, you look at a different image. I think those things would begin to change, because there has to be that interior attitude. It has to happen inside, and then hopefully it'll flow out. But you also got to be doing the work outside. So it's the inside and the outside. So it's the both and pray. This is it. Pray, and more prayer.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Well, I think soon we should move to questions. I'm wondering if you might just briefly comment on what's something that gives you hope. You said you're a hopeful person. What would you think of first if you were going to say what gives you hope moving forward?
What gives me hope? Well, this session gives me hope that we're doing something on race and talking about race. That really gives me hope, and that we have a few people who want to hear and learn. So that really gives me hope. What also gives me hope now is seeing younger people, the next generation, taking up the mantle and beginning to do some things. Because though I look young, I'm not this young. Not as young as I look. And so it's good to see that the younger persons are taking up the mantle. but I also see my hope is in the that intergenerational work will begin.
Mm-hmm.
That we will, that those of us who are older will be able to be open to learning from the younger, and that we can work together,
Mm-hmm.
and that they can learn from us
Mm-hmm.
also. So that is my hope. Within the, as I said, within the Catholic, if I were to say specifically within the Catholic Church, where do I see hope? I'd have to say I see it in my parish's religious education classes, where students who are coming from a variety of different cultural backgrounds are beginning to ask questions and are beginning to be themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that. So I think at this point we could transition to taking questions or comments from our participants. Are we ready for that segment, Dr. Burns? Oh, you're muted still, Dr. Burns.
Yes, I'd ask everyone, if you want to ask a question, please write it in the chat function, and then I will call on you and you can unmute yourself and then ask your question directly to Drs. Teel and White. So I would like to start with Ricky Tassau. If you're there, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. My question was for Doctor. Do you believe the Catholic Church is addressing racism adequately? If not, what are next steps to attaining this goal?
I think it's addressing racism adequately. No, I think if when we had our gathering about 2 weeks ago, when we were addressing, when, as I said, 1,400 primarily Black Catholics came together looking at the racists in the pew, I think what came out of that was that no, we are not addressing racism adequately. That there still is that sense that we want to be nice. Dr. Cecilia Moore wrote an article several years ago in 2008 entitled "From the Ivory Tower to the Pews: Theology's Role in Shaping Catholic Racial Thought and Practice in the 20th Century." It was in New Theology Review. And one of the things that she talked about is that there is still that sense, we're about being nice, but I would say we're about being nice, but not being prophetic and not speaking the true truth, as Sister Thea talks about. And so there's certain times we'll talk about certain issues, but there still has not been that apology regarding racist, enslavement, and what the Catholic Church's complicity in that. And so you have to begin to name it first, and then you can journey for it. But when it's still very ambiguous and you're still not really naming what's going on, when you still have the church as a whole not speaking out about the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and Tamir Rice and young children, whatever, you don't have the church speaking out about that, then we still have a long way to go. Though we have members in the church, we speak about some issues. We talk about being pro-life. If we're going to be pro-life, you be pro-life from the womb to the tomb. And we are pro-life until that child is born, and then you're on your own. I don't know if that...
No, it does. Thank you very much. I appreciate your response.
Thank you. Well, I'd ask Kathleen Peck, if she is present, to make her statement. Kathleen Peck, could you unmute yourself?
I can. I'm so appreciative of all that you're doing at CCTC. And I wanted to say to Dr. White, the biggest thing in my life that's affected me has been music at Black liturgies and the spirit of welcome, and more and more that need to celebrate Eucharist with people of color. If I have to drive 20 miles, I'm going to end up doing it, because it's like starvation without it. And I laughed. I don't follow football, but did I hear that they were going to do the Black National Anthem at the beginning of all the football games? It was like, listen, like sing, drink it in, cherish this, because it's the true spirit, I think, of Black spirituality that will be the thing that saves us as a nation. I'm looking at the vision from SPLC that talks about progressive actions for voting, and what it's the antithesis of what the every night news tells us that the progressives and the radical left and the Black People Matter campaigns want. And why people can't see the falsehood in that and see the overriding generosity and acceptance. So I don't know.
Could we ask Dr. White to respond to that?
Well, one of the things that I would say, that there still is that fear of Black people. If you're talking about this whole sense of embodiment and, thinking about spiritual resistance and resilience, part of my journey as a person of faith, as a spiritual person, has been to acknowledge the fact that my Black body is feared, and that I have to, and for a long time as a young adult, I would try to do everything I can so that you would not fear me. It was part of it. It was also the acceptance, thinking that white is right. So, dealing with my hair, how I did my hair, how I would try to be more like Karen, very calm. You were talking earlier, Karen, about, there's a way that you're supposed to be, and you don't show emotion and whatever, because I would be seen as an angry Black woman. So it was that view. And I had to, it's only in my later years where I've come to realize how much damage that has done to me and how much damage that's done to my community. And we believe that. I read another book, Eloquent Rage. Every woman should read, Black woman should read this book, Eloquent Rage by Brittany Cooper. Because I now own my rage. Just as Serena, one of the examples she used is Serena Williams and Venus Williams taking their rage, and look at all the games they've won in tennis, because they've been able to channel that rage. Well, not to be afraid of your rage, but to use that rage. Jesus was knocking down those tables in the synagogue, in the temple. We can use that rage, and no longer to apologize. We have good reason to be angry.
Okay.
And it is not, and we should not blame the victim, because white people are afraid of Black people. We have not, for the most part, we haven't done anything to make you afraid of us.
Yeah. Okay, can I ask Alan Weseleski? Is he there?
Thank you, Dr. White, for all your food for thought and hopefully for action. How does our Catholic liturgy align with your top 10 list, and where do we most need to improve?
Well, the top 10 list is more about your own personal journey into spirituality. So you should make your top 10 list of things you love to do, and then once a week do one of those things. That would help you in the sense of being able to then be more life-giving to, let's say, liturgy and whatever. But in the sense of liturgy, what I always do, you always sometimes go to some document. There are things that the popes have said about bringing the gifts of Blackness to the church. And so as long as they, and I even think the liturgy document speaks about, there's exceptions in like dance and whatever, depending upon your culture context. Well, our culture context is that we dance in the Black church. So so I go right back there. It's like, okay, it says right there, it says in the document. So that's why we do it here in the church. And as I said, so that's where we can look at things. Now, the challenge is right now we're in a time of pandemic. Let's look at the time of pandemic. This time of pandemic has really done a number on how we engage and how we celebrate. But I'm telling you, there are some wonderful Black Catholic liturgies happening online. And I'm not going to give them to you. You contact the Institute for Black Catholic Studies, Dr. Kathleen Dorsey Bello, KD Bello at Zula, xula.edu, and she can give you some places that you need to be in contact with. But to see how the engagement, that even in this virtual space, there's a way that you can be engaged. There's a way that we can be engaged.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I did post a link in the chat for everyone to the Institute. So if you're interested in that, you can follow that link right now.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay,
Yeah.
is Mark out there? Identified simply as Mark, who's a priest.
Yes, my name is Mark Murtis. So I had the good fortune of pastoring an African-American community here in Kansas. And my question, Dr. White, one of the challenges we faced was the engagement of young adults, and probably easier to engage young adult women than it was young adult men in the liturgical life of the church. Do you have any ideas?
Well, one of the things that years ago when I was working with young adults, I haven't been doing that in a while, but I remember what one young adult said is, how am I to find my place when you're always sitting in the seat? That for some of us who are older, it's a time for us to move out of this way to allow young adults to be able to do some different things in the church. We always, there's a sense that we forget we were not fully formed when we began years ago, but our expectations and our patience with young adults and their developing and their emerging has sometimes inhibited them to be able to truly give of their gifts. I think of the fact that many of our young adults are digital natives. They know how to use the internet. They know how to use web. Well, how can we use those gifts in our churches? How can we do that? How can we begin to use different music, do some drama, do some different video? I was just at St. Agatha's on the west side, and they've got some young adults doing video stations and some really powerful things where they're embracing the gifts that the young adults have. But part of it is that you got to get to know your young adults. Our system, the American system, is a system that values the object. So we think young adults, that's the object. We want to get these objects in our pew. But the black spirituality and brown spirituality also are about the person. We need to develop relationships with persons. We need to learn from them what it is that they need. And many times we as seasoned adults, we aren't very good at listening. We're much better at telling you we'll listen to a point. But if we begin to feel uncomfortable and not like, oh no. So I think that whole thing, when I went back to talking about a shared story, we need to hear their stories. We need to learn from them. And from there, so don't look at the object of getting them in the church, look at the object of getting to know young adults. Then the steps of getting them in the church, but get to know them, get to know the community.
Thank you. I just remind people to keep yourself muted until you're called upon. So I'd like to call upon Steve Schillig now. Is Steve there?
Oh, also I want to say to Mark, we have a good resource, Dr. Timon Davis, who works with young adults, and Dr. Ansel Augustine, who works with young adults. Those are two Black Catholic leaders with young adults also to connect with.
Okay, thank you. Is Tony Pickler here?
I think Stephen is here.
Stephen
Yeah,
is
I'm here. Yeah,
Oh,
can you hear
all
me?
right, go ahead. There you go.
Yeah. Hi, Dr. White, thanks so much for all that you had to offer here. I actually have to leave to teach in about 5 minutes, but I wanted to run this question by you. I love what you had to say, or your claim that teaching is a spiritual practice. I relate to that a lot, but there clearly needs to be a pedagogical shift within the classroom itself. So I guess my question would be, how can I, as a white male theology teacher, center Black spirituality in my own pedagogy that promotes anti-racism as a learning outcome?
Well, one of the things, what do you teach?
Well, I teach scripture and I teach ethics.
Okay. One of the things that I did in the sense of teaching is I changed how I set up the classroom, and I changed it how I began the classroom, so that the beginning of the class, I began with a time of shared story of their, also when I was teaching the spirit, let's say if I was teaching the spirituality and justice class, I also had them bring item that they had learned about, just something that was an injustice that week, bring it to class. And the beginning part of the class was our time of sacred sharing. And we'd share about the story and why was this important to bring this up, and why was, and then we brought this to prayer. This is something we need to pray about. Then this was a source for what my rest of my class was for that particular week. So you're entering into dialogue, you're looking at the experience where the person is, you know, starting with the experience. You're putting that in the dialogue with the spiritual tradition, and then you're moving into the academic aspect or the lectural aspect. And I found that to be very helpful, that doing that, I noticed a transformation over the past few years in how I changed my way of teaching, because the question had become, how can a person go through 4 years of theology and remain unchanged?
Yeah, that's provocative. Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Is Tony Pickler here?
Yes, Vanessa, so good to see you again.
Howdy.
Known you for a long time. As you know, I'm up here in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and we've got a long history of, we're becoming more diverse, but you know, our history is one of which, when you saw a Black man in the grocery store, you wondered what position he'd play for, you know, on the Green Bay Packers. And so there's a lot of people who just don't want to address the issues of white privilege and racism. I know the diocesan officials up here many times tell me they have a difficult time really addressing that in parishes, because people are, there's an inertia. There's, you know, people don't want to be faced with that, with those topics. So how do you have any suggestions of how do you address that, knowing that there's a lot of, there's just a lot of resistance to the issues of racism and white privilege?
Right. Well, what I don't really know. I start off with saying I don't know your particular context well. So, you know, though I have been up to Green Bay, I really don't. But I think one of the places that you would start, really, before you can start, oh, we need to change this, is you need to do the education yourself. So whatever your leadership team is, whatever your parish team is, you need to be doing some education. You need to be getting some of these sources. Some of these books, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi, The Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent. So you want to talk about race, you need to get some of these books and begin to do some reading and begin to put this into dialogue with your own experience and for some transformation. Then you can move to what you need to do to be anti-racist. What we tend to do and what tends to happen is we start immediately we're going to do this program, and we haven't done the work we need to do, the intellectual work, the spiritual work that needs to happen to get us to change. almost 30 years ago, I was part of a Black Hispanic ministries group. As a young adult, just beginning in church, it was Black, Hispanic, and white ministers who came together once a month. We came together for a meal, and we came together for shared discussion about our experiences. That experience, being rooted in that experience, is why I'm able to do what I did to do today. Because I had to do some inner work. I had to work with some of my biases and prejudices, and then be in dialogue and shared community with this group all those years ago. So then now I come to this time, and I'm able to journey in interculturality and anti-racism. But if I hadn't done that way back then, it's been a process. And we want to jump, we're a microwave generation. We're, credit card. We don't want to do, there's the process to get there. And so something that needs to happen with your team, however you decide your team is going to do some education and do some spiritual work before you can move to that step.
Yeah, I could add just something very brief to that. I think I hear where you're coming from. I think it's important to be doing this work. I find for myself, it's really important to do it on my own. Like I sit and read a book and I think about it in my own head and I process it, but it's also really important to find other people to talk to about it, other white people even to talk to about it. So one way that I think can be effective if you're wanting to start a conversation, rather than feeling like you have to immediately be proposing a change or a solution, could be to say, I attended this event and the speaker said this thing that really struck me and I've been thinking about it, right? And just kind of have a conversation with somebody about that. Like, what do you think? Have you ever thought about that? Here's how it struck me. So that can be a way to start to process the ideas that you're thinking about together with other people. And then it's more of kind of a collaborative discussion where you're both thinking about it together, and you don't have to feel like there's a lot of pressure in that particular conversation to get to a particular goal or ending point for that discussion, but just to kind of get used to talking about these things and processing these things together.
And then one of the things that you can possibly do too, just thinking what Karen is saying, is that sometimes having an outside person come in and do something and to plant some seeds that then you as a group begin to discuss further. So like, as I said, like we had this that was going on in a couple of weeks. I know we also have Tia Noel Pratt, who's going to be doing some things on looking at racism in the Catholic Church. Maybe that would be a time to invite some of your colleagues to, why don't we all look at this and then have a discussion about this as to how this address our particular reality. It may be helpful.
We do have Dr. Craig Ford over at St. Albert College now, who I know you know, so he's pushing us, which is good. Thank you.
That's good. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Is animator Carolyn out there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Hey, thank you, sister, for a wonderful presentation. I was on a call last night with a woman, Mary Frances Winter, who wrote the book Black Fatigue. Mm-hmm. And she talked about how we's tired, but in the spaces that I'm in, I'm one of the few Blacks, and the conversation won't get initiated unless I initiate it.
That's true.
So
That's
I still have to do some of the work to initiate, although I'm fatigued. Mm-hmm. Can you speak a little bit about that in your own life?
Well, that's why you saw when Karen was telling me, what are these practices you need to do for white folks? I said, let me talk to Black people first, because we're fatigued, we're exhausted. As I said, it's exhausting. It's exhausting work, and until I don't see any, like in the next year or so, it's not going to change. We're going to be the ones that's still going to have to be the ones that talk. Number one of the things that I do, is I take Sabbath time. I take time where I turn off the, I do not listen to, I put an away message on my computer. I don't listen to that phone. I don't say I take a whole day, because taking a whole day may be hard. Just taking a Sabbath morning, afternoon, or evening. I do that. And during that time, it may be what I need to do is sleep. Or it may be just go out for a walk or visit, whatever. But I take that renewal and refreshment time. That gives me what I need. Then, as I said, doing that top 10 list of the 10 things you enjoy doing that you used to do. You may not even do them anymore, but you used to do. And then once a week, make sure you do one of those things. If weeks have gone by and you have not done something that you love, then danger should be going off inside your body, because we've disconnected from that. Being a person of gratitude, our ancestors were people of gratitude and praise. So you may have had a horrible day, but in the midst of that day, there's something that can, something happened. Let's say like you had this conversation, I just saw somebody I hadn't seen in a while, and that was God's grace. Because what you focus on is what you give power to. We've been focusing on just the tensions that are going on in our society, and for a variety of different ways. And that has been draining for all of us. And we have lost sight of that God's grace is present. Our ancestors, our holy ancestors, Thea Bowman, Augustus Tolton, Julia Greeley, Elizabeth Lange, Pierre Toussaint, and Henriette Delille, they were people of gratitude. They saw the blessing in the midst of everything. We need to be able to see the blessing in the midst of it, in the midst of everything, and do that. And be connected. You don't have to have a lot of close friends, but have one or two that you can say, I need to talk to you. This day was a trip. And I cannot believe what that person asked me to do. And if you can have that colleague, an ally, because I'm not sure your location. Like for me, I have that trusted person at CTU in my school of theology, and I have those trusted people outside of who have nothing to do with ministry. You also need those folks who have nothing to do. You need those trusted people who have nothing to do with the work that you're doing. Because what it turns out that begins to happen is all our relationships are inbred, and we don't get to see a different way of thinking, because everybody is, I'm around academics all day. But as I said, one thing that's good now is I'm living in a house there's not an academic in this house. But that was my life before COVID, is all that. So I'm getting the both. You got to get the both and. So maybe those things can help you. And if you're the type of person who drink every once in a while, have yourself a nice little wine party with some of your friends. Which is what I do. And those folks who are out there know it too. We get together and have our little glass, and we have our virtual wine, our virtual beer. And that's a really good thing. That's why you see the smile on my face all the time.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for one more question. Would Roy Lee like to ask his question?
Yes, thank you again, Dr. White.
Father Roy, so good to see you.
Good to see you. This is a twofold, and maybe you can elaborate on it. The first one is, we put too much emphasis on these bishops. And I am sick and tired of being sick and tired of these bishops, especially the white bishops, trying to address or not doing anything with the racism. And we're not putting enough emphasis on empowering the lay people right now. They're going to be the problem solvers for this crisis we're in. The second piece is the feminization of the black man in the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is there is a certain type of black man that can only come through the ranks of the Roman Catholic Church. And that description, for the most part, they cannot be too dark, They have to have a certain kind of diction, a certain kind of thinking, a certain kind of walk, a certain kind of talk. And if not, you won't get very far in the church. If you can elaborate on those two, thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start with the laity one first, since I'm a lay person. Historically, in the Black Catholic, in the church, in the Black community, it has been the participation of the laity. It's only, as I said, when we went through a little short time in the 80s, where we, the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where we thought we were getting all these Black priests or whatever, that we began to have, and our bishops, that we began to have this hope and focus that suddenly this church was going to be overrun with bishops of color, which we found that was not true. But the fact that we need to go back to the fact that our church survived, the Catholic Church in the Black community survived for hundreds of years because of the faith and the actions and the power of the laity. And we were doing, we were doing our little hush harbors, before, it became known as hush harbors in our communities. And we need to get back to that we do not need to be constantly looking to the bishops for a sustenance in our communities. Yes, there are some sacramental functions that need to happen, but we were able to work around that too. And so such places as the Institute for Black Catholic Studies, Catholic Theological Union, I got mentioned both my institutions, and all the other schools of ministry and programs. We need to, the Light Conference, the places where we need to go for our study. We need to be encouraging and having people go there and be able to communicate to them why, what's the meaning, because people aren't going to connect with anything if they don't see the meaning of it in their lives. That's part of the spiritual journey. If you don't see meaning in it, the question back for the about the young adults. If young adults don't see the meaning, why should I be Catholic? Why should I have faith? If you can't show me how this has helped my life and made it better, then there's a problem with that. Now, to address the question about who has been ordained and who can become bishops. Well, as I said, I'm not part of the ordained, and so you got a little inside track on that one that I don't have, and I would definitely say there needs to be more research around that issue. But I do believe one of the things that I would say that there has the greatest threat in the U.S. is the Black male.
Yes.
The white people is, that yes. I can say that we have demonized the Black male body. We have the whole sense of that this a body to be feared. And so that racist understanding, that racist thread that has been socialized within the United States of America is going to seep its way into the church.
Yes.
In the United States. And so we need to begin to address, we need to have more programs that begin to address how we have demonized the Black body, and particularly how we made the Black male body one to be feared, and we made the Black female body, we sexualized the Black female body. Yes. Because I'll give you an example of how race and gender kind of come together. And this happened to me at my school that I teach now. I got one of the students in the class came to me after our class. If she had been in a small group, came to me and said she needs to talk to me because one of the students, male students, had a problem with what I was wearing, that he could see through it, and needed to teach her to talk to me. Now, let me just say, I had a brown knit shirt that came all the way up to here, just like this, and then I had a sheer top over it. But it was like, remember when, kind of like that, a couple of years ago, there was the sheer, the sheer sleeves and kind of Indian type clothing that was in fashion. And so I had, as I said, I had this knit top all the way up here and a sheer top over, and then I had a long skirt they came to my ankles. Khaki skirt. I went and took a picture of myself with that and went directly to my academic dean and said, I just want you to know what has happened, because I don't want it to be said that I'm tempting this School of Theology and Ministry, this seminary, I'm tempting the students. Now, I doubt very seriously any of my white colleagues would have gotten that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But I knew what to do. As I said, I knew, because I lived in this world long enough, and I said I had done high school retreats. I was director of high school retreats for the Christian Brothers. I dealt with retreats with all male teenagers. Now that's and the thing is, I never in my 4 years doing those retreats with them had ever, one of my female colleagues, was always getting sexual innuendos. I never did, because those young men knew from jump not to mess with me. I didn't expect a graduate school of theology and ministry. I'm dressed up to my neck, to my ankles, that I would receive this communication, and they had the white female come tell me.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So I understand this whole, as I said, there's the sexualization of women, and there's the demasculization and the demonization of the Black male body.
Yeah.
And those are things that we yes, we are going to need to rise up and shine the light on as we continue.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I'm
you. We
sad
have a
to
lot
say
of work to do.
we're out of time, but I would like to have Dr. Teel or Dr. White, if they have a final comment they would like to make.
I'll let you go first, Karen.
Well, I'm grateful to everybody for coming. This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm really grateful for all the participation and everybody really taking this issue very seriously and being willing to think together in this space. So thanks to the CCTC for providing it, and thank you especially to Dr. White for joining us all the way from Chicago. I really appreciate your willingness to spend your time and your energy with us thinking about these topics. So thank you so much.
Well, I think my final words would be just keep on keeping on. That yes, this work is challenging, but this work, there's also joy in the work. So it's a both and. And Karen and I have journeyed together for a number, as I said, for a number of years, and we've been able to laugh. And I know there's times when you want to cry.
Yep.
But
that happens too.
But if we do not stay vigilant, if we do not continue to resist, and if we don't do those things, as I said, those practices, those things that we need to do so that we can continue in the work. The challenge sometimes is that we get involved in justice type work and then we disconnect from our spiritual foundation. That we cannot do. It's a life and death. It really is life and death now, that we have to stay connected spiritually, because there are the demons of evil that are out there, and we know what and who they are. And as one who journeys in spirituality, I always say that Satan speaks in half truth. The devil always speaks in half truth. So there's always some truth, a little truth in that. And then if we have not been spiritually fortified and journey in the sense of our spirit, and have the community, have an authentic community around us, we can go down a trail that will lead us to death, not life. And that's not where we want to go. So with that, I'll end it.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Drs. White and Teel for a wonderful discussion. And I just want to give a shout out to Just Faith program is using the Austin Channing Brown book and the White Fragility book as part of their modules. So,
oh, good, good.
And I would like to, so thank to our speakers, but I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lovette-Colyer again to take us home.
I just very briefly want to add my immense gratitude to our presenters today, Dr. Teel and Dr. White. Thank you so much. What a wonderful, engaging, inspiring, challenging session this has been. So thank you. For everybody listening in, please know that this will be posted online. So if you'd like to watch it again or share it with other people, you can do that. Be on the YouTube channel for University Ministry. The other 2 sessions also are online, so you can share those, revisit those if you like. We take a little break now in our series. So for the next 2 Thursdays, we don't have a session, but then we resume with 3 more later in October. So October 8th is the next one, Thursday, October 8th, and Bishop Mark Seitz from the Diocese of El Paso will be with us. So it should be especially poignant. Please register for that if you haven't already at the CCTC website. So www.sandiego.edu/CCTC. We'd love to see you again on October 8th. One more time, thank you to Dr. White and Dr. Teel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Blessings.
Thank you.
Blessings to you all. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
too.